On the 30th of April 2020, the University of Lagos SPE student chapter organized a webinar on the future of work in the energy industry, via the Cisco WebEx application. The guest speaker was Mr. Femi Odusote, the Deepwater Reservoir Engineering Manager in Chevron Nigeria Limited. It was an interactive session and it had a strength and focus on the significant phase the energy industry is going through. There were 89 participants from SPE Lagos section, SPE Benin section and Chevron Nigeria Limited. Mr. Femi discussed the different set of skills required to stay afloat. He also advised participants to leverage technology such as AI, robotics and data analytics.
Thanks, first of all, to Tosin and his SPE team for putting this together. Tosin interned at Chevron a while ago, and even though it was a short period, he added a lot of value to our team, and I'm confident that he learned one or two things. So I'll be speaking about the future of work in the energy industry. I think it's important to share my thoughts on this and just kind of what is going on now. I'll try to bring some of that into context, and hopefully at the end of the day, we can have a conversation about what the future might look like and how it would apply to you all. So once again, I'm Femi Odusote. I'm a member of the SPE. I'm currently the Deepwater Reservoir Engineering Manager at Chevron. And so I would first of all start by sharing my outline for the presentation. So I'm going to speak a little bit more about myself, about my journey so far, and then I'll break my talk into two sections and then try to bring it all together. The first will be on the future of energy in the industry, and then the second will be the future of work as a whole. And I'll kind of go through what I think you all should be focusing on, and then we can, if we have time, take some questions and have some closing thoughts at the end. And so if that is okay, I will proceed. And so I actually am an alumni of Unilag, finished with mechanical engineering in 1999. So if you do your math, that's about 21 years ago. My math is right. I did my internships and with the oil industry as well. And then just as I was finishing my NYSC, I got accepted to go do a master's in petroleum engineering in Penn State University in the USA. I also followed that up with an MBA because I was interested in how the business of the industry worked as well, and I'm interested in how you can combine both to help make better decisions and move the industry forward. And so that's my educational background. I'm also a registered engineer with Koren, and as I said, I'm a member of the SPE and also the Nigerian Society of Engineers. And so in terms of work, I've worked as an intern with Texaco Overseas Nigeria Limited. That was kind of during my undergrad. And then when I was in graduate school, I also had a stint with the Department of Energy in the US. And so when I was done with my graduate school, I was fortunate to join Chevron in Nigeria, and that was back in 2005. And during my time, and I've been in Chevron ever since, during my time in Chevron, I've worked in various local and international applications, and also in various varied asset classes, if you will, from onshore to offshore to deep water. Also worked in the shale basin in the US as well for a little bit. So I've worked as a production engineer, both in Lagos and both offshore in Escravos, working on the platforms. I've worked as a reservoir engineer. I've worked as a simulation engineer. I've worked in planning, and I've also worked in core operations. So that's kind of my journey so far. For SPE, I've been a member, since I was in school. And so when my math, again, that's about 19 years and counting. And in that time, I've authored and co-authored several papers. I've been a former member of the Lagos Section Board and also continue to participate as a technical paper reviewer for the annual conferences that happen. I've also had the privilege of speaking at engagements like this on a number of occasions, and I'm really excited to do things like this. It's a passion of mine to kind of engage with people and move the industry forward. So enough about myself. Let me take you through to the meat of my talk today. And so the future of the energy industry, wanted to highlight some key issues we need to consider. And I've put it into kind of three buckets in my mind. And one is that the global energy demand will grow and will continue to grow going forward. And I'll expand more on that as I go through my talk. The second is that global energy markets are always in transition. We move from the old days where we had combustible engines, and we're moving towards where we have more electric vehicles now. And so there's always a transition in energy, where the energy is coming from and where we are going to in the future. And I'll talk a bit more about that as well. And so lastly is that oil and gas, which is the industry I'm in, will continue to remain a key part of this, what we call an energy mix. And so three things: that the energy demand will grow, the markets are always in transition, and then oil and gas would always be part of that energy mix, that even with the introduction of renewable, solar, and electric, oil and gas will still be part of the mix because that demand is going to continue to grow. And we need all parts of this energy mix to fill that demand. So let me go into a bit more detail here. And so in terms of energy demand growth, according to the International Energy Agency, according to even consultants like Woodmac, the plots always look like this. So if you see in my top right, where I'm showing the global population growing into the future. And so what you notice in this chart is that the developed economies, the US, Greece, and Europe, those developed, can we please mute our phones? That helps. And so the developed economies, okay, thank you. Tosi, are you still with me? Let's confirm that you can still hear me.
Yes, yes, I will. I can still hear you.
Okay. So you see that the developed economies are staying flat in terms of population growth. And the developing economies, which I call like Africa, Asia, India, those economies continue to grow in population. And so that's one of the factors that would cause this demand to grow. Also, if you look at the demand by sector, so these are the industries that use this energy that we produce in power generation, in industrial companies, in transportation, and in building and other industries. You can see in all of these industries, we continue to need energy to power those. As the developing economies like Africa, for instance, as we continue to grow, there's a rising number of people that would need this energy, and this energy demand is going to need to be met by by some source of energy. And so those are the 2 points I want to highlight here. That there's going to be a continued need for the energy that our industry is a part of. And so next is talking about energy transitions, and this one is very interesting. So I did some digging and some background on this. So as I mentioned earlier, energy markets are always in transition, right? But this pace of this transition is not fast. It takes time. So I'll give an example and kind of walk you through these time scales that I have here. For instance, in the early 1900s, you can see the pie chart there is saying most of the energy that was being used by the world was from coal and from biomass, which is solid fuels, firewood, trees, just burning anything you can find that is natural, and using that to get our fuel for growth. The oil that was being used then was primarily for lighting. They weren't using oil in combustion engines and things like that at that time. So move forward into the middle of the 1900s, there's major industrialization. We had gone through 2 world wars, and so much had happened in the world. The cars were introduced, the airplane industry, aviation, and everything was booming. And you see the oil part of that and natural gas start to grow. Coal is shrinking, biomass is shrinking, but at that time, there's also an introduction into renewables. People started thinking about solar and the like. And so fast forward to recent times, say 2017, oil is still a big part of that mix. Natural gas has grown some more. LNG has come into the picture. There is increasing use of hydro and nuclear, and renewables is also increasing. But you can see coal is shrinking, but it's not gone away totally. There's still a lot of this world that is using coal to fire engines or fire industries or to provide power for their industry. So it's pretty interesting how you kind of transition through time. And I'm saying this to just highlight the fact that these transitions don't happen quickly, but they're happening, and you have to recognize that they are happening. And that's how the world is changing slowly but surely. And so another thing to look at, I thought this was interesting, just looking at the oil part of it and talking about kind of the industry today and what that would mean. And so we always talk about commodities being in a cycle. So I thought to share this history of crude oil prices. And this is even going back as far back as the mid 1800s. One thing you would notice is, I'm getting some feedback. Can we please mute the phones? Thank you. And so one thing you would notice is that there's always peaks and falls. And this price is all reference to 2013. And so they reference all the prices back to 2013 dollars so that you can have it, remove the impact of inflation and things like that. But in the last, say, 20, 30 years, the two major peaks that we see are around the end of the 1970s, where there was a war in Iran and the prices shot up. And Nigeria also went into a boom period at that time as well. But after that, prices dropped. There were little peaks and ups and downs throughout that period. But the latest big peak was, when this is like in the early 2000s, when Asia driving demand was creating need for this oil. And there was not enough oil for that demand, so prices spiked. But then right after that, in the 2007 period, there was a global financial crisis that hit. So that dropped prices and went up again around the time of the Arab Spring. And now we're in a continuous decline. A couple of things that have happened in the last 2 years, say 2-3 years. One is the shale revolution, as we've all heard about in the USA. Increasing supplies all over the world are causing prices to drop. And now, more recently, in 2020, we're seeing the impact of a drop in demand, serious drop in demand across the world due to the current pandemic. And so the reason I'm sharing this is, first of all, to let you know that prices have gone up and down, and they will continue to go up and down. And we expect that to happen going into the future. A lot of times we do not know how long the low end would occur, but we know that it would occur and then it will bounce back up. And like I said before, there's a continuous demand for energy, and oil is a part of that energy mix. And so I just wanted to share that thought with you all as well. And so the last part of this whole looking at the future of energy is the energy mix, which I've talked about a couple of times. And so the first point I want to make is, the world will continue to rely on fossil fuels going forward. And this chart kind of elaborates that. So if you look at the chart, I'm looking at millions of tons of oil equivalent energy over time from 2000 to 2040. And then the colors represent different sources of energy, from solid fuels to gas to hydro to coal, wind, nuclear, oil, solar, and geothermal. And so we now split those sources to hydrocarbon and then the zero carbon sources of energy. And so one thing that this chart highlights is that in year 2000, for instance, the hydrocarbon versus zero carbon energy sources were 92% of the energy sources in 2000 was from hydrocarbon. But fast forward to 2040, which is sometime in the future, which is not so far away, it is, but it goes by pretty quickly. At that time, only, the projections here are saying that only about 15% of the world's energy sources would come from these zero carbon sources. And so the point is, oil and gas and hydrocarbons will still be needed going into the future, but it will be part of this energy mix that we talk about going into the future. The second point here is that renewables are the fastest growing source of energy supply. So even though they're a small fraction, they're actually growing fast. So there's a lot of talk recently about solar, about electric cars, electric vehicles, and a lot of big companies are making pronouncements around where they want to be in 2040 and 2050. So a lot of capital still has to be spent. A lot of work still has to be done to get those sources to be a bigger part of the energy mix. Maybe sometime further down, but this forecast I'm showing here is based on a scenario of what they call the stated policies. Like if we do things the way we're doing it now, and if we move at the pace that we're moving now, this is where we expect to be in 2040. And so the last point here is that, even though electric vehicles are here, there are things that are, even more impactful, such as fuel efficiency and gains in fuel efficiency are more impactful to this energy mix than even electric vehicles. And so I know there's some countries that are making pronouncements and switching to electric vehicles, but the truth is the airline industry, the industrialized industries and manufacturing, most of those industries are still a big part of the draw of energy. And so cars are just one of it. And also those electric vehicles, if you think about the world, not just the super developed economies, the rest of the world still needs hydrocarbon for the near future, at least for the next 20 years, given the assumptions we know today. So there might be some other factors or some unknown that might disrupt our view of the future, some new invention that we don't know about yet. But given what we know, this is what the future will look like. And so going a little forward, just kind of switching gear a little into what the future of work might look like. And the truth is that the future of work is going to look very different from the way we see it today. There are many things happening, and I know you guys are seeing some of those things, even the way we are meeting right now. This time last year, this kind of meeting will probably be me coming into the school and having a session and meeting you all one by one. But now, we're all working virtually. And even after this pandemic passes, the whole world is going to be working very differently. So this is just a peek into some of that. And so based on the technology and tools that we have today, if you think about it, about 45% of the jobs
Can't hear you people.
today, about 45% of the jobs today can be adopted or can be automated using current technologies. What I mean is that the technology that we know and see today can eradicate almost 50% of the jobs that we have today. Examples are, automation, for instance, in airports, where they used to have a lot of people in check-in counters, for instance. There's now a lot of self-checking machines at the airports. Even in some supermarkets, there's self-service at a lot of supermarkets. Maybe not so much in Nigeria, but in some of the developed countries, you see that you go to a supermarket, you don't have to talk to anybody. You buy your items, and then you just pay for it and move out. The other item here is about open data sources. So and there's a lot of tools and software that are being developed right now that are just open data. So you don't have to have a particular software. Even in the engineering space, there's a lot of tools online where it's not about, you have to buy a license to use it. There's a lot of open data source applications and a lot of push towards that, that way of doing things. Robotics, self-driving cars are already here. Routine inspection robots are being tested, and the picture I'm showing in the bottom right here is a robot in an offshore facility that can go around and inspect and do scans, and instead of an operator going around checking pressures and checking temperatures, this robot can go around and do all of that and eliminate the need to do that. And the thing about robots is they don't get tired, they don't need to eat, they just need maintenance. You know what I mean? So, and this is available today
Like
as we
since
speak.
1 hour. Okay, like since 20 minutes now. No hearing. Please go on that.
Okay. All right. And so, as I was saying, there's drones right now in the field that are working in the subsea industry. We have ROVs, which are remote operating vehicles that go underwater, do the inspections, and it's all remote. We don't need to send anybody down there. Holograms are already available where you sit in your office and you have what we call a digital twin of the facility. So some experts can be, for instance, in Norway, advising somebody in Nigeria about something they need to fix. and the person doesn't need to physically come there. You can look at the item and it will be like the person is already there. And so that is already technology that exists today. Artificial intelligence, genetic algorithms, using neural networks to solve problems, machine learning, chatbots. These are things that exist today. Augmented reality and all of that. Think about the games that we play. All those things have application in the workspace. And all those things, like I said, are available today. And it just needs people to apply those technologies. And a lot of the jobs that we think we are looking for today will just go away. And so also when it comes to kind of work life, I don't know if you've heard the term called the gig economy, where people are working more like freelancing, and there's more and more people that are working that way, people that want more autonomy and control. They want to be able to manage their time, balance their career and family needs, make income from multiple sources. So that's the gig economy, and there's more and more people working like that. So the energy industry is not immune to that. And I find a case where people just have this skill, and companies just go and say, look, I just need you to do this project for me, and once you're done, you can move on, you can do the same project for other people. Regular hours of work are not really going to be required anymore. It's not going to be required for you to come to a job at 7 o'clock and leave at 5. And this current pandemic has proven that to be something that is real. Most people are working from home. I'm working from home. So do I really need to wake up at 4 a.m. in the morning, enter third mainland traffic just to get to an office and do what I can do from my house? So that is something that is going to change going forward. More virtual workplaces, more work going to be done remotely. Routine work is going to be replaced by automation and robotics. I talked about that earlier as well. And this is not just low-skilled jobs that would go away. We're talking about medical jobs. There are apps now that you just need to put in, diagnosis into the app. They're asking you questions. It's a chatbot. It's all artificial intelligence that is linked to a database of whatever else you want, in the medical world, and it can actually diagnose the issue for you. And so a lot of those immediate, low-level medical type jobs might go away. Even in the legal space, drafting documents, you want a real estate document or you want to do an agreement, you just put some stuff in and all of a sudden you get that agreement that is standardized for the situation you want. Banking is not new. Engineering and technician jobs are also affected. So think about that. The work life as we know going into the future is going to be different from what it was 5 years ago, and definitely different from what it is today. And so how would you survive in this future, right? I'm showing a couple of pictures of, and I'm purposely showing like young kids. So the kids nowadays that are in secondary school are all the people that are going to come in knowing some of these things. They're going to have this skill set because that's how they're being taught today. Different set of skills will be required. And if you think about it, if everything is being replaced by robots, what are the things that robots cannot do that humans can do? So those human skills are the things we need to work on and develop. Creativity, critical thinking, being able to solve problems, being able to work with people, being able to see an issue, bring everything together, see the pros and the cons, and try to solve a problem, knowing what you know about the task, what you know about the physics behind those things. Emotional intelligence, being able to work well with others, knowing yourself and knowing others. Something called a growth mindset, that can do attitude, being able to see a problem and know that that problem can be overcome. Those are the kind of skills that you would need to develop in this new future that I'm describing. You have to learn how to leverage technology before it leverages you. You have to learn about coding. You have to learn about application development. And even in the engineering space, you have to learn how to apply some of those things. I always tell people that the theory of what we do as petroleum engineers hasn't changed, so much. Fluid dynamics, thermodynamics, the activity index, and Darcy's equation haven't changed in 100 years, and those equations are not going to change. But how do you apply it? How do you take it and apply it to problems? How do you make it easier and faster? How do you develop on some of those things to solve the problems of today? I talked about my time in the shale business in the US, and they were drilling, hundreds of wells, and they were drilling wells so fast because in the shale oil patch, those wells don't last long. So the wells, maybe 1 or 2 years, the well is gone because the decline is so fast. So they have to drill very fast to keep a production profile. And if you're going to be drilling that fast, you don't have time to do a lot of analysis. And so they started using things like data analytics to determine how to drill wells, where to drill, how to complete the wells. They were not doing any reservoir simulation. They were not doing any complex decline curve analysis. They were using historical data and data analytics to make decisions as to how the next well can be better. And once they get more data, they go back to the analytics and apply it. And they are using that to drill wells. They do things like drilling the wells in a factory mode. And in that mode, you have to think about things differently. And that's how they've been able to increase their production and apply and just cause what we call the shale revolution now. So that's kind of the way we need to be thinking. And think artificial intelligence, think how can robots or algorithms and genetic algorithms and augmented reality, how can they help us do what we need to do? So do not be afraid of technology. You have to leverage that technology and use it to differentiate yourself. So the sub-comment I have there is that about 30% of the jobs in the next few years don't exist. There are going to be new types of jobs, and you have to be ready to apply these new skills in those new kinds of jobs. And so that is the end. So at the end of the day, if you think about it, so I talked about the future of what the industry would look like, and talked about the future of work. I tried to kind of marry some of those two things together to give us a view of what things might look like going forward and how we should be prepared for the energy industry of the future, really. And so that is my talk for today, and that is what I wanted to share with you all, and I would be happy to discuss with you guys if you have questions or comments at this time.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Femi. Does anybody have a question?
Hello? I'm so sorry.
Yes.
Hello, we can hear you.
Hello? Oh, okay. So I have one question.
Yes.
Okay. Concerning his comments on the integration of robotics and AI, how best can undergraduates, like especially Nigerian undergraduates, like apply themselves to learning of data analytics and AI? Like considering that like we're in an environment that doesn't really facilitate these kinds of things into our curriculum. Like, what's the best part to actually take, considering where the world is going, and what does he feel is best?
And that's a very good question. But I'll kind of throw it back as a challenge, right? So a lot of the things we know today in tech were not taught to us in school or in the curriculum. In this world we're entering into, you have to be able to learn fast and learn on your own. There's tons of resources online that you can tap into. There's free courses, free hackathons that you can attend to get some of those skills. And I would encourage you all to just search and tap into those. Things like this WebEx that we're using right now, nobody taught us how to use it, right? So we all kind of, jumped into it, click around and learned ourselves how to use technology. Same with our cell phones and same with, devices that we have. So I would encourage you to just be a self-starter, a self-learner, and tap into some of those things. I always say that school that we go to teaches you how to think and how to solve problems, but it's for you to go into the world and do that yourself. So that's how I would answer that.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Femi, I have a question.
Okay.
Yeah. So, considering the way Nigeria is always like years behind compared to other countries, so if like you have discussed how different things will come into the industry in years to come, and the chances that Nigeria will be able to keep up with these other countries, I don't know, I think it's pretty low. So my question is, over like in the next years, would the energy industry in Nigeria struggle to compete with others, or would it stumble over the years?
Yeah, you're going to have to come back with that question. I didn't hear the last part.
Because I was saying, like in the next couple of years, the energy industry in Nigeria present will be able to keep up with the trends outside. Like,
So are you talking about trends in terms of technology?
yeah, technology and efficiency. Yeah.
And so I guess if I get your question right, so the the technology that we see, even the technology I speak about, a lot of those things are even available, in Nigeria already in the industry. So the industry is a global one. I can't really put barriers or lines around it. So I spoke about sort of like data analytics is something that we can do now. I spoke about robotics where even in my company we're looking at some of those initiatives already and try to apply that. There's things around remote wellhead monitoring where you have small devices that you put a SIM card into it essentially for the remote well, and it sends data into the cloud, and you can receive that data on your cell phone and things like that. Those things are already here in Nigeria and can be applied. So I don't know that there's any real barrier. I think the barrier is going to be in the companies that are bold enough to move into this future and adapt to the change. So adaptability is one of the big things that we talk about in moving forward. Are you able to adapt, and how fast are you able to adapt? I'll give an example. So even in this current pandemic that we're in, there are some companies that cannot work right now because they've just been stuck on everybody must come into the office. They don't have people that have maybe laptops, or they're not big on having their people have the ability to work remotely. So those kind of companies will suffer now. So, going forward, being able to adapt, looking at the trends and being, people that can adapt quickly is going to be critical. And that applies to individuals as well.
Good afternoon, sir.
That,
Good afternoon, sir.
I
So
can hear you.
my question is pertaining to like AI and data science in Africa. So, like, we're all aware of like the AI trend in the world. So, like, for Africa, for instance, now like Chevron, in Chevron now, how has and machine learning like played a role like in advancing technologies, or how has data science played a role, or machine learning AI played a role in Chevron? Because these things are not really appreciated in Africa. So like that was my question. How has it played a role in
Okay,
Africa?
thank you.
What has it
Thank you. And I think
delivered?
that's a good question. So I heard you, and I think I got your question. So really, I want us to remove our minds from these lines that we're drawing, Africa versus the rest of the world. AI and data analytics is data, right? And so it's up to you to analyze the data and use the data that you have to make decisions or see trends. And I'll tell you for a fact that data analytics is something that is being used in not so much in the oil industry in Nigeria, but in other fintech type industries. And then you see how fintech is growing, and even the online sales and things like that. People are using data analytics. And what is data analytics? It's just, we collect a lot of data, right? And you are allowing the data speak to you as opposed to letting your understanding of the physics speak to you. And the way we use it in Chevron, for instance, we started doing things around, if I bring it back to the petroleum engineering world, so our history matching in our reverse simulation, for instance, you have tons of data. And so we're using things like genetic optimization to try to do automatic history match, for instance. So instead of spending 6 months trying to history match to all this data, you can feed your parameters into a tool, and that tool actually optimizes, it learns, and it optimizes, and it continues helping you do your history match. So we have those already in place. And going back to data analytics is, for instance, I know that I have maybe a field that has production data, maybe wellhead pressure data for the last 20 years, and the data is just all over the place. I can use data analytics techniques to analyze that data, and the data might show me a trend that, maybe every 3 months, this trend is showing me that every 3 months something happened. You don't know why it's happening, you don't know what is happening, but that's what the data is telling you. And so maybe that thing that happens in a 3-month period is something, maybe the pressure dips and comes back up. So you as an engineer, you're thinking, this doesn't really make any sense, but the data is telling you something. And so you dig deeper, analyze the data further, and maybe find out that, maybe that's every 3rd month, maybe after that 3 months, maybe there's something that happens, maybe a tanker comes and there's some operation that they do on the facility that impacts that well. And so you can see how, not just looking at, our engineering theory, but having the data speak to you outside of your theoretical calculations is a big, powerful tool, because that data analytics is just a fancy way for just saying, look at the data, look at multiple regression, look at, different mathematical methods to analyze that data. And so that's something that anyone can do once you learn those techniques. And that's what I'm encouraging everybody to learn those techniques, see how we can apply it to the problems that we have today. That will make you a more powerful engineer.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir. Yeah, my question actually is on as regards vulnerabilities that may be faced in the future. Now, when we are looking at the transition of the energy that of our industry to virtual works, there's one particular challenge we'll be facing in the future when we work virtually is actually going to be as regards cybersecurity. Because now when people have to go to work, the majority of the network they use are LAN, that's the local area network. But when we are going to be working virtually, then we'll have to be sending things over the internet and making the industry more vulnerable to attacks. So is there a particular way we can avoid those kind of things from happening?
No, you can't avoid it from happening. And there are people, so even as we speak now, cybersecurity is considered as one of the biggest threats to major international companies worldwide. It's not just for the oil industry in particular. And so what we need to do is continue to build those barriers and build those defenses against possible threats. And that's something that's going to continue now and in the future, whether or not we're working remotely or working in the office. We continue to face those threats. Companies in general are building those defenses, and as people are getting smarter, hackers are getting smarter, the companies are also getting smarter. And so it's going to be this continued development in the industry. And I think going virtual is just going to be the next step in that evolution. And I believe that there will be more tools that prevent negative impact.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, sir.
Hello, sir. Hello, sir. Hello?
Hello,
sir.
Yes.
I have one more question. Considering the petroleum space and considering petroleum engineers specifically, what's your take on petroleum engineers trying to gather knowledge and expertise in other areas of energy in general to up their skills? What's your take on that?
So if I get you right, when you say other energies, you mean like a petroleum engineer going to get expertise in solar?
Maybe solar or hydro or geothermal, for instance?
And so, I think adding skills is never a bad thing. Like I said, if you think about the energy mix, there's still going to be a place for petroleum engineers now and going into the future. But we talk about the energy mix. And so if you find that, you have an interest in expanding your skill set, be able to tap into and become more of an energy focused person, not just a petroleum focused person, then I think that would just add to your portfolio of knowledge. I think the point I want to emphasize is that petroleum engineering is still going to play a key role, going forward. But that being said, you find companies like BP, for instance, are announcing that they're not going to be an oil company in maybe 20, 30 years. And they have all these engineers that are there. So they would have to retool themselves. They would have to say, okay, how can I apply those skills that I've gained in energy? How can what skills are transferable from one source of energy to another source of energy? So those are things you have to continually think about as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
All right. Do we have any other questions as we wrap up?
Yes, I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. My question is on soft skills. The present issues with soft skills are that you cannot really identify them either by certificate, not always by certificate, and you can't see it on the face of people. So I want to understand, like, what is what is what is really the
Hello?
average. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I lost you for a second, but I think I get your question.
Yeah.
And I think
So
one go ahead.
okay, one issue is that acquiring these soft skills and getting a certificate to consolidate that skill that has been acquired might be sometimes difficult for students, especially maybe students that are just living hand to mouth and all that. So what can be the solution to this problem, and what are like the responses from professionals when they see people who have acquired these skills, put them on their resume, and maybe don't have a certificate to show for it? Is that really an issue, or can be overlooked? Thank you.
Okay. I think the onus is on the professionals or the employers. I think nowadays we're moving towards an era where, apart from just looking at somebody's CV, once they interview or they do an assessment, they are looking out for those things. So there are ways that they can assess for those things. While it's okay to say, okay, you've done this and you have it on your CV, I wouldn't see it as a differentiator. Once you have a soft skill, for instance, and you say, oh, you can work with others, or you have good problem solving skills and things like that. Those are things that are demonstrated through experiential type roles and assessments. So through your internships, for instance, or through just being on projects or working in committees, either paid or unpaid type of committees or projects. So look for opportunities to do things like that. Work with the SPE or participate in an NGO, for instance, to gain some of those skills. Because soft skills are not necessarily tied to the energy industry, but they're gained from experiential type activities. And those are the things that will come out. I think when you're in an interview or you're talking to somebody and you say, look, you've done this, this, and this, and this is how you've been able to do those things and can articulate those things. I think that would be stronger than anything you can put on your CV.
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, my name is Jeff. I'm calling from Benin though.
Okay. Oh, good to meet you, Jeff.
Yeah, so literally I've been trying to survey around for schools literally that could help us um go ahead in petroleum engineering. That's to acquire our postgraduates, especially for areas where we know are low budget and are not as expensive. So based on the level of experience that you have in the industry, is there a way you could literally help in identifying some areas where we could literally go in for postgraduate studies so we could not be considering high cost and we could get the experience and knowledge that we actually desire?
Okay, so you're asking me to recommend like a low budget school. I think off the top of my head, I can't really recommend any, but I think it's something that, even, looking for courses, not necessarily trying to do a full degree. If that's an issue, then you can say, okay, let me identify some skills I'm trying to acquire and then do, courses here and there. I think that's one way to kind of get some of those skills that you're looking for. I've seen cases where maybe Schlumberger is doing like an online course on some, new analysis tool or some of their new software, and so you can build your repertoire of skills by doing those things. There are schools everybody wants to go to, like maybe the top school in the UK or the US, and but I know that there are schools all over the world that also provide these skill sets, and I think it's something that you can do some research into. But off the top of my head, I can't really say I can recommend one school or the other.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, sir, please, I have one more question, please.
Okay.
Okay, so please, I want to ask how, sorry, I should be directing this question to HR, but I feel with your level of experience, you should be able to give an answer, help with it. So,
Okay.
how
I'll try my best.
Oh, okay, sir. Thank you. How well do online courses weigh on the CV?
So I think I'm probably speaking personally, right? So there's some, maybe job applications, and most of the jobs, except maybe it's an experience hire, most of the entry level jobs only require, a BSc, although they will tell you that a postgraduate degree is a differentiator, right? So if you had a postgraduate degree, it might differentiate you from the next person, but it's not going to stop you from being shortlisted for that role, because all they need is a minimum requirement. Like I said, if you get certain skills, so for instance, somebody that has a master's in engineering versus somebody that has done a couple of courses and has shown demonstrated experience in that engineering, I personally would probably weigh the person the same. But yes, you're right. Sometimes, when people look at CVs, they see this person has a master's from Imperial, so therefore such and such and such. You want to look at that person. But I think, anything to differentiate yourself is appreciated. And I think that's kind of the point I would make and leave it there. So it's not to knock down one or the other, but at the end of the day, if somebody I have colleagues that don't have graduate degrees that came in straight, from school, from the NYC or from some internship, and they did the test, and then they got the jobs, and they're working with, they're working with Nigerian companies or just independent companies, and all they have is businesses, and they're doing very well. Because at the end of the day, it's how you deliver on the job that matters. And so I think that's what needs to be what you need to focus on.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much.
And so I can take maybe one or two more questions, and then we'll try to wrap up.
Right. Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. My question. Post COVID-19, what do you think will be the atmosphere as regards employability and taking in interns in companies now? Because we feel, I mean, some of us are meant to start like July or so. So what would be the effect on internship and employability generally?
So I think it would vary from company to company. I don't know. So, like I said, these cycles have happened over and over again, and I think in my own career, I've seen maybe two of those cycles. Interns are not usually, are not usually impacted. And I think the learnings from before is that you want to keep some of those programs going because we know that the price is going to come up. And when the price comes up, you don't want to start scrambling to start off all these things, and you want to make sure you have a pipeline that is continuous. Usually the first victims, and I'll be frank with you, is if there's going to be any kind of headcount type adjustments. Usually it's usually the more senior people that will say, hey, you guys are people that have been here for so long, if you either take early retirement and things like that. So those are usually kind of the first people that they would say, we'll give you some kind of severance, and you're close to retirement anyway, then you guys can exit the business. So and I go around that way to say, look, typically, and it depends on the company, interns are not really the ones that they say they want to cut.
Oh, all right. Thank you, sir.
Okay, last
so,
question.
Okay, can you hear me, sir?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So apart from typical petroleum engineering tools, like maybe PETEX or Eclipse or Petrel, what sort of technical tools would you just recommend that a good petroleum engineer should know? Because so when we talk about data analytics, you could use a number of softwares for that. You could use maybe Python, or you could use any language, any programming language. So we know that, a couple of these things, we should learn them. We should begin to get familiar with latest technology. But on a quantifiable basis, what tools would someone say he has that would differentiate him from someone that's just...
Okay, I think I get your question, and I'll just speak from my kind of my own experience, right? I can't really say that I would advise that someone focuses on, say, one tool or the other. I think it's more about your adaptability and your ability to learn fast. So, for instance, tools like Eclipse or Petrel, those tools are continually changing. There's always new tools coming in. There's always new software to learn, a new language to learn, a new, you know what I mean? So if you kind of say, I want to just learn this tool and that's what's going to do, by the time you get into the industry, then it might be the case that, that tool, they're not even using it anymore. So right now, I think learning the skills, I know there's a lot of things around, using things like Power BI, using things like, all these cloud-based software. And that's where the world is kind of going to. But I think the core skills are what matters for me, to be honest, and being able to use those skills to solve problems. The tools are just tools. And like I said earlier, the equations are the equations, right? So if we're going to solve this matrix of equation, or solve this material balance equation, it's always going to be the same equation. You're just solving it with different tools. Someone can do it faster, someone can do it with PETEX, or you can do it with Excel, or you can do it with just by hand if you want. But the truth is, it's really, for me, not about the tool. It's about how do you solve those problems, how do you think about those things, and how do you apply yourself and help the people that need to make the decisions make those decisions they need to make. Yeah, so thanks for that. And so let me just kind of wrap up. I just want to thank all of you for your time. I think I was counting at one point, we had about 60 people on the call. I want to thank you for your attention. Thank you for your time, and also thank the SPE Student Chapter of Lagos for the opportunity to come in and speak to you all today. I appreciate it, and I do not take it for granted. And I hope you've learned one or two things. My intention was to kind of get you all thinking, and I hope I've been able to achieve that. So thank you once again. So Tosin, over to you.
Okay. So, thank you, Mr. Femi. Thank you for the enlightening session. And I believe everybody has learned a couple of things already, and I'm very grateful. So, on behalf of the Greater Lagos SP Student Chapter, I say big thank you for today's session. Uh, so, for everybody, the slides will be available after the session. Thank you very much for joining us today. God bless you. Goodbye. Thank you so much.
Eh, eh, eh.